In the Antarctic Ocean, 28 people were on board a ship, but their ship had become trapped in millions of tons of ice. They had spent 7 months standing still in one place. During that time, one night they heard a powerful sound from beneath the ship. At the same time, the ship tilted to one side. It seemed as if someone had tried to push the ship from below. What happened after that tilt was beyond their wildest imagination. Welcome to Scope History Videos. In the Antarctic Ocean, waves are as tall as buildings. Winds blow at 100 kilometers per hour. The water temperature is extremely cold. The human body begins to freeze in this water. Traveling in this ocean is like embracing death. Because of the cold and the waves, survival is already difficult. Massive ice chunks are as big as mountains. These ice chunks can easily crush a ship. But 111 years ago, ships and technology were not very advanced. At that time, a group of 28 people's ship got stuck in this terrifying sea. Under the open sky, they survived not just weeks. They survived not just months. Astonishingly, they survived for a full 2 years. Far and wide, there was only ice. There were stormy winds. There was a lack of food and water. There was no chance of rescue. This is a survival story. The world has called it the greatest survival story of all time. The hero of this story is Sir Ernest Shackleton. He was an explorer. His mission was to test the endurance of the human body. Because of this reason, he named his ship Endurance. He had done many terrifying missions in his life. In 1901, he was part of a mission to reach Antarctica, but he had to turn back. He was about 700 kilometers away from his destination. In 1907, he tried this mission again, but just 150 kilometers before the goal, he had to return again. This time, in 1914, his plan was different. He did not just want to reach Antarctica. He wanted to cross the entire continent on foot. The reason was simple. Sir Ernest Shackleton wanted to do something no one had done before. This mission was called the Imperial Trans-Antarctic Expedition. The mission was extremely dangerous. Because of this danger, no one wanted to join him. Sir Ernest faced his first challenge. He had to find a crew for his expedition, so he wrote an advertisement. He published it in the Times newspaper. Remember, this was not a normal travel advertisement. The opening words were shocking. Men wanted for hazardous journey. The advertisement clearly stated several things. The pay would be very low. The journey would be life-threatening. They would stay in darkness for months. Danger would exist every moment. Safe return was not guaranteed. Sir Ernest wanted people who were not afraid of risk. Soon he hired a crew of 27 men. Sir Ernest had planned this mission for 4 years. But as the time approached, problems began to appear. The dream of his expedition started fading, because World War I had started in the world. Everyone thought the expedition might be cancelled, but Britain had also declared war. Despite the war, Britain gave permission. The Imperial Trans-Antarctic Expedition was allowed to continue. For this mission, a very strong ship was needed. The ship had to break through the ice of the Antarctic Ocean, but this was not an ordinary vessel. It could not be built easily. Fortunately, such a ship already existed. It had been built for Arctic travel. A Norwegian company had built this ship. It was originally made for another explorer. That explorer wanted to take elite tourists. The plan was to hunt polar bears using this ship, but his business model failed. The project was unsuccessful. Sir Ernest Shackleton bought this ship. He named it Endurance. Endurance was specially made from American oak. Its design was extremely strong. The wood could withstand immense ice pressure. It was a hybrid ship. It had sails. It also had an engine. Finally, the day arrived. The day Sir Ernest had been waiting for many years. On August 8, 1914, the journey began. Endurance left the city of Plymouth in England. For the next 4 months, they traveled in the Atlantic Ocean. First, they reached Argentina. After that, they went to South Georgia Island. There they completed their final preparations. Then on December 5, 1914, they changed direction. They turned the ship toward the Antarctic Ocean. Their destination was the Weddell Sea. On Endurance, there were 28 people, but they were not alone. There were also 50 large breed dogs on the ship. These dogs had an important job. They would pull sleds and equipment on Antarctic ice. This sea journey lasted for 36 days. Now they were just one day away from Antarctica's coast. But suddenly disaster struck. On January 18, 1915, their path was blocked. The ice layers on the Weddell Sea kept getting thicker. These layers continued growing stronger and stronger. At one point, the ice became 18 feet thick. Endurance no longer had the power to break through it. In some places, the ice looked weak. But even walking on it was impossible. Endurance became trapped in the ice. It was stuck about 130 kilometers before its destination. The destination was Weddell Bay. At first, it seemed like a temporary problem, but in reality, it became the biggest obstacle of the expedition. The Imperial Trans-Antarctic expedition was now stuck. After many days of effort, they made a bold decision. They decided to push the 300-ton ship manually. For 2 days, they kept working. They broke the ice. They tried to create a path, but the crew became completely exhausted. The task was even harder than they had imagined. After many days of effort, they moved the ship slightly. They pushed it forward about 300 meters. But soon endurance got stuck again. After 1 month of attempts, they accepted reality. On February 14, 1915, Sir Ernest gave up trying. He made a new decision. The ship would stay with the natural movement of the ice. He hoped the ice would eventually break, winter would pass, then the ship could move again. Meanwhile, endurance became like a winter station. The crew continued their daily routine inside the ship. The only difference was that the ship was not moving. It was standing still in one place. The crew's spirit was still very high. Sir Ernest Shackleton maintained strict discipline. The crew tried to keep themselves busy. They held discussions with each other. Sometimes they played soccer on the ice. They even cut each other's hair. They also spent time cooking. They were all waiting for one moment, the moment when the ice would break, and the ship could move again. Days continued to pass on endurance. The crew members grew closer to each other. They developed emotional bonds, even with the animals. Everyone hoped for one thing. One day they would reach civilization again. But nature had other plans. In April 1915, the ice did begin to break. But something unexpected happened. The ice pressure started increasing. Ice layers began stacking over each other. This was a very dangerous situation. Millions of tons of ice were compressing together. This pressure also started affecting endurance. The most important task now was clear. They had to free the ship from the ice pressure. Everyone worked together. They began clearing the ice around the ship. After weeks of effort, the crisis was avoided. But the danger had not completely disappeared. Then came another terrifying moment. On the night of July 14, 1915, something strange happened. Suddenly, a loud sound came from beneath the ship. Endurance tilted to one side. No one knew what had happened. Maybe it was a collision with a whale, or maybe something else. Somehow the night passed, but in the morning they saw something shocking. The pressure of the ice had caused major damage. The ship had tilted badly. Even worse, the rudder of the ship was broken. The rudder is used to steer the vessel. Now the ship had lost an important control system. By this time, the crew had been stuck for 7 months. They were about 2,000 kilometers away from any human settlement. They had no contact with the outside world. There was no hope of rescue. They trusted only one person. That person was Sir Ernest Shackleton. On October 18, 1915, the expedition suffered a huge blow. The dream of the Imperial Trans-Antarctic expedition collapsed. For 9 months, the crew had remained stuck in one place. Then one night, a sudden wave of pressure hit the ship. Endurance tilted instantly by 30 degrees. Now there was a serious risk. The ship could start leaking water. Cracks began appearing in some parts of the ship. Water slowly started entering inside. The crew worked the entire night. They tried to stop the water from entering, but their shelter was barely holding together. Finally, on October 27, 1915, Shackleton made a painful decision. He ordered everyone to abandon the ship. Saving their lives was now the only priority. Essential supplies were removed from the ship. Animals were taken out. Food supplies were taken out. Water supplies were taken out. Lifeboats were taken out. Bedding and equipment were also taken out. Everything was placed outside on the ice. Now the entire crew stood on the ice. They were under the open sky. The ship that had protected them for months was now doomed. Endurance slowly broke under the pressure of the ice. Gradually, the ship began sinking. Now, everyone had the same question in their minds. How long would they survive on this drifting ice? Sir Ernest Shackleton realized something important. Staying on this drifting ice was very dangerous. He remembered a place. That place was Elephant Island. Elephant Island was about 500 kilometers away. In the past, some shelter and supplies had been left there, but reaching it was not easy. They had only 3 lifeboats. Shackleton thought about the danger. If the ice could crush a large ship like Endurance, then the lifeboats would be even more vulnerable. So a new decision was made. They would try to walk toward Elephant Island. The crew began their dangerous journey. They started moving across the ice. This was the most dangerous part of their adventure. For the next 6 months, they faced constant danger. The ice sheet beneath them was unstable. Sometimes it cracked suddenly. Sometimes it drifted with ocean currents. Fortunately, the drifting ice slowly moved in one direction. It moved toward Elephant Island. Seeing this, Shackleton made another decision. They would not forcefully walk across the ice. Instead, they would drift with the ice sheet. They hoped the current would carry them closer to Elephant Island, but now a new problem appeared. The crew had almost no food left. They also had very little water. Whatever they found on the drifting ice, they hunted it. Sometimes they hunted penguins. Sometimes they hunted seals. By February 1916, a long time had passed. It had been 13 months since they left England. Their condition had become very weak. Sometimes they survived on just one biscuit. Each biscuit had to last for a long time. Over the next month, the situation became even worse. They were still waiting to reach Elephant Island, but the food supply was nearly gone. Finally, they faced a heartbreaking decision. They had to kill their dogs. This was the only way to survive. For the next few days, they survived on this food. They hoped things would improve soon. They believed that Elephant Island might have supplies. Meanwhile, the drifting ice slowly changed direction. Now, it started moving directly toward Elephant Island, but the sea conditions became very harsh. Storms continued for many days. The temperature dropped extremely low. It reached minus 20 degrees Celsius. Many crew members suffered frostbite. Their lips began swelling. Their mouths became swollen too. Even swallowing food became difficult. Finally, by April 1916, something incredible happened. The drifting ice carried them near land. They reached Elephant Island. After 16 months, they finally stepped on land again. This was the first solid ground they had touched in a long time. The crew felt a moment of relief, but the relief did not last long. Elephant Island was completely barren. There were no proper supplies. Staying here for a long time was impossible, especially since their food supplies were gone. There was only one remaining hope. That hope was South Georgia Island. It was about 1,300 kilometers away. Sir Ernest Shackleton made another bold decision. He would attempt a dangerous sea journey. He would travel by lifeboat to South Georgia Island. This mission was almost suicidal. Shackleton selected a few crew members. On April 24, 1916, they began the journey. They left Elephant Island behind. Their destination was South Georgia Island. This route was one of the most dangerous sea routes in the world. Giant waves surrounded them. Some waves were as high as 90 feet. The freezing cold was unbearable. Their bodies began freezing slowly. They had another huge problem. They had no GPS. They had no compass. They navigated using only the stars. They also used the sun as their guide. Despite their greatest efforts, progress was very slow. They could not travel very far each day. Sometimes they managed to cover only a few kilometers. In total, they could not travel more than 80 kilometers at first. But they did not give up. They continued fighting against the sea and the cold. Finally, after 16 days of extreme struggle, something incredible happened. On May 10, 1916, they reached South Georgia Island. Sir Ernest Shackleton was with 5 crew members. They had successfully reached the island. But a new problem appeared immediately. They had landed on the wrong side of the island. Between them and the whaling station stood massive mountains. These mountains were about 4,000 feet high. Crossing them seemed almost impossible. But they had no other choice. Shackleton and his men began climbing the mountains. They climbed continuously for 36 hours. There was no proper rest. There was no proper food. Finally, after the exhausting climb, they reached the other side. There they saw the whaling station. Shackleton's physical condition was extremely poor. He looked completely different from before. When the workers at the whaling station saw him, they did not recognize him. No one could believe what they were seeing. This was the same Sir Ernest Shackleton, the same man who had left almost 1.5 years ago. Now he had returned in a terrible condition. Shackleton stayed in South Georgia for 3 days, but he could not rest for long. He was worried about the rest of his crew. 22 men were still waiting on Elephant Island. Their condition was also very poor. Shackleton immediately began planning a rescue mission. He made several attempts to reach Elephant Island, but the sea conditions stopped him again and again. Each rescue attempt failed. Time kept passing. Finally, on August 30th, 1916, something amazing happened. Shackleton finally reached Elephant Island. As he approached the island, he saw smoke rising in the distance. The crew had lit a fire as a signal. Shackleton did not know how many of them had survived. He feared that many might have died. But as the ship came closer, the truth appeared. Astonishingly, every crew member was alive. All 22 men were safe. Not a single man had died. It was an unbelievable moment. On August 8, 1914, they had left England. Now, 2 years and 22 days had passed. Finally, Shackleton brought his entire team safely back home. It is true that he never completed his original mission. He had failed twice before in reaching the South Pole. Even in the Imperial Trans-Antarctic expedition, they got stuck early. They were only about 120 kilometers inside the Antarctic region. But something greater happened. This survival story became legendary. It gave them a place in history. Perhaps a place they could never have achieved otherwise. After 107 years of this event, something surprising happened. In 2022, the ship Endurance was finally discovered. It was found in the Antarctic Ocean. The ship was lying deep on the ocean floor. It was about 3,000 meters underwater. Amazingly, the ship was still perfectly preserved. Even the name Endurance was clearly visible on it. This discovery shocked historians and explorers. It proved how powerful this story truly was. I hope you liked this Scope History video. Please like and share the video. Thank you so much for your loving comments. I will see you in the next amazing video.